Okay, so hello everyone, and welcome to our first class, our first lesson on the story of David and Bat Sheba.
And shalom from Vancouver.
Oh, hello from Vancouver, but you're being recorded. Every word you're saying is recorded, so
Slicha.
count. Okay, so in December 19th, which is happened to be my birthday, 1994, the Israeli government almost fell and was voted out because of a remark made by Foreign Minister Shimon Peres, may he rest in peace, which was also Prime Minister and also President of the State of Israel. But even the New York Times picked up on it. You could see it, that little blurb in the New York Times there, why Israel argues about King David. And from the Bima of the Knesset, during his speech as foreign minister, Shimon Peres said, I don't believe everything King David did was very Jewish. Okay, referring to the story of David and Bathsheba. And the ultra-Orthodox parties, hearing that, were extremely upset, and they got up on that same place and they said, we're going to vote against the government because you offended King David and his memory, and because the Talmud teaches us that anyone that claims that David has sinned is but wrong. The Talmud says that. If you say David has sinned, you are wrong. But the Holy Bible, in Hebrew as well, and the English translation, Chinese translation, any translation says David has sinned. So I'm not the foreign minister. I could say these things without being concerned about, losing my position. I hope no one here is too sensitive about this here. But it's fascinating. I'll read you the part of the article here. Israel's ruling coalition Monday defeated a no-confidence motion from ultra-Orthodox parties to protest remarks made by Foreign Minister Shimon Peres last week that biblical King David engaged in behavior that may not have been up to religious Jewish standards. The legislators voted by 56 to 41 with one abstention to scrap the no-confidence motion, but until sparks flew for the second time in a week between the ultra-Orthodox rabbis and supporters of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin's center-left coalition over the role of King David in Jewish history. This is what you do in the Jewish Knesset, okay? So Rabbi Avram Ravitch of the Torah Judaism Party said a reference by Foreign Minister Shimon Peres to the king's biblically recounted romance with Bathsheba hurt, in my opinion, millions of Jews all over the world. And last Wednesday, Peres said during the debate, not everything King David did on the ground, on the roofs, is acceptable to a Jew, he said. He was referring to the affair, and Peres later apologized, saying he had no intention of insulting that which is holy to Israel. And Talib Asana, a legislator from the Arab Democratic Party, said the king's good name was also important to Muslims. So this is not just a Jewish thing. Okay, this could have created a world war, okay, but he criticized the ultra-Orthodox legislators for trying to make political capital out of a holy figure. I also agree with him on that one. But my point is that if Peres would not have apologized, the government would have fallen, okay? And this is over a story that happened thousands of years ago, and it just shows us how unbelievable this story is, and the different commentaries and the different ways and takes which we will explore in our classes. It's going to be 8 weeks until I think the end of August, where we would look at the story of David and Bathsheba from different angles and points of views. We will first look at the story itself and try to analyze it, where we will clearly see the sin, but then we will move on in history And maybe that will be already the third or fourth lesson, where we would look at the sages in the Talmud and see why do they claim David did not sin, and we will actually see different opinions. Okay, there are opinions in the Talmud that David has sinned, and there are opinions where he did not sin, and we will try to analyze and understand them, but only after we get a good understanding and a good text base of the story. We will also look in the story in the art and the way over the years different artists have portrayed the story of David and Bat Sheba in different elements of it, which is also very interesting. Middle Ages, modern art, Chagall. Just for example, Chagall was obsessed with the story of David and Bathsheba. He has 18 paintings that he did of David and Bathsheba. We will look at some of them, try to analyze what did Marc Chagall see in that story and how did he look at it. So that will be another angle. We will see bits and pieces from the movie, David Bathsheba. Anyone here watched the movie when it was out in the 60s? I did not, I wasn't born yet. Maybe someone could help us here. Okay, but go home and watch it, it's on YouTube, okay? So you have, it's a Hollywood movie with, I think, whatever, big names from that time. We will look at also the moral questions. We will explore also the issue of tshuva, of repentance. And can someone correct the wrong deeds when they do something so bad and so terrible like King David did, which in a way is also the essence of why this story is in the Bible and why King David is regarded as such, you know, a righteous person even after this story, or not a righteous person, but not as evil as it's portrayed maybe at this story per se. So we will look at all of these things, and feel free if you have, you know, questions or comments. Again, it's all recorded, so take note of that. And I apologize to begin with if my Hebrew is not always clear, so you can, you know, I'm sorry, my English is not so clear, and you need something to be clarified because I'm not saying it in the right way. So now we will share the screen of the text. Okay, are you able to see?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah? Oh, no, okay, we have to, sorry, those for people Zoom.
We saw it on Zoom.
Yeah, I know, it's an issue with the sharing. Okay, is this big enough? Okay, and if you want to actually open the actual Bible, you have here a lot of Bibles. We're in Samuel 2, okay, chapter 10. When we do, you know, a proper text study of the entire book of Samuel, we will really see how it all starts with King Saul, who's really the first king, and where his kingdom is being transferred to David and to the house of David for various sins. So Samuel 2, chapter 10. You have the page number?
483.
Yeah, chapter 10, and we're at verse 17.
I think somebody said 483.
483. Okay, and you can also watch it on the screen. Okay.
But it's also there.
If the screen is big enough, right? Okay, so so here we have King David fighting and expanding his kingdom after he unites the both kingdoms, the kingdom, you know, the tribes of Judah, which is his tribe, and the other tribes of Israel. They are all gathered together, and David is a you know an officer, a fighter. He's a true army person. We know it from the time, where he hit Goliath, was very successful, right? He knows how to aim. And then he leads the people of Israel as a king also. He goes out to fight with them and he leads the force. He's always at the front. He's a role model for a commander. Okay, and in the Israeli army today, we also say acharai, which means like after me. Like, it's not like in some armies, like the officers are back, they're sort of like watching what's going on, making sure that the forces are going in the right way. Not in the Israeli army. In the Israeli army, the officers are going first. So David is that role model. And on verse 17, it says that it was told David, to David, and he gathered all Israel together and passed over the Jordan and came to Chilam, and the Arameans set themselves in array against David and fought with him. So there are different wars that are happening with David, and here's an example of how he is at the front. And on verse 18, the Arameans fled before Israel, and David slew of the Arameans 700 drivers of chariots and 40,000 horsemen, and smote Shovach, the captain of their host, so that he died there. And when all the kings that were servants to Hadadezer, that's the king of Aram, saw that they were put to the worse before Israel, they made peace with Israel and served them. So the Arameans feared to help the children of Ammon anymore. So now there is, the Arameans are smited by David. He conquers them, but there's still a war to be held with the Ammon. Okay, so this is where the story of Bat Sheba and David begins. It's important to understand the context because it's in the middle of the war. So the way the Bible is structured is on chapter 17, what we just read now is the end of the war with the Arameans, the middle of the war with Ammon. Now we're going to have a few chapters of the story of Bat Sheba, and afterwards we're going to conclude with the war with Ammon. That's how it's structured. Why is it important? We'll understand a little bit later. And now starts our story. And our story actually starts with the war with Ammon. And it came to pass at the return of the year, okay? So this is sort of like a year has passed by, and at the time when kings go out to battle, which is the time when kings go out to battle, probably around the spring or the summer. If you could just turn off your phones, please. Spring or the summer, which is the right time for war. You don't want to be engaged in war during the winter, okay? That David sent Yoav and his servants with him and all Israel, and they destroyed the children of Ammon and besieged Rabbah, but David tarried at Jerusalem. Okay, so now we have something different happening. If at all wars David was out there fighting and leading the army, here suddenly David is staying back home. What's going on? Why is he staying home? Is he getting tired? Okay, is there some issue with him feeling like he's not eager to go out on this fight? The Bible does not tell us. But this is sort of like the cause of the story of David and Bat Sheba is because he's not with his army, leading his men. He's back at home. Maybe thinking about the army, maybe he's thinking about other things. But this is sort of like a clue that the text is giving us here. And actually, Rabbi Ben Ilau is saying that the whole story of David and Bat Sheba is really based on what's happening up in the war front and what's happening back home. And there's no symmetry between that because what's happening, I mean, there is a symmetry in the way that David is going to sin, David is going to be found at his weak point, and that's when also the people of Israel fighting, the army, is also going to be at a weak point and not succeed. So the story is sort of like paralleling these things, giving us sort of like a hint to how this is all going to end. And just so that we're textually all on the same page, so Rabbah is Rabbat Ammon today. Okay, that's with the capital of Jordan. So that's the Rabbah that they are referring to here. And now starts the story. When David's sitting in Jerusalem. And it came to pass at evening time, eventide, that, as you know, the sun's going down, that David arose from his bed and walked upon the roof of the king's house, and from the roof he saw a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful to look upon. Okay, so here we have another sort of like hint that it happened in maybe the evening where all the soldiers went out, or it just happened in one of those evenings after they were all out. David gets up from his afternoon nap, and this is again some kind of like a hint, it's a criticism in a way, that his soldiers are out there fighting and he's napping. So again, we see that dissonance in the text, and he's walking on the home of on the roof of his home, which is also, you know, everyone's seeing him like walking and strolling on his rooftop instead of being with the people and leading them up to war. He's idle, maybe he's bored. So the text is again not in a direct way, but hinting to us that there's a way to criticizing him. And he sees this beautiful woman, and the commentator says that she is probably after her menstruation, okay, because she's following the biblical law that after her menstruation, thank you, she needs to bathe like in a, you know, in a mikveh and purify herself, and this is probably the time that she is doing that. It's also telling us something very important, that when her husband, and we're going to talk in a minute, when her husband went to war, because he's one of the soldiers, okay, even if they had sex together, she was not constipated. She did not get pregnant. Why? Because here she now she has the menstruation, and she needs to bathe afterwards. So we will know that when she does become pregnant, we know that the father is David. So this is like important information that the Bible is telling us at this point. And yeah, yes.
When you say that, the Bible actually doesn't say that. The Bible says she's bathing and she's very beautiful. It says everything else is commentary.
Everything else is commentary, exactly.
So when we choose that commentary, what commentary do we choose? Do we go to the source? Where does this come from?
So the commentary is sort of like based on the reality. It's assuming that people followed the biblical law, especially on things of that importance of purity and, you know, and women bathing in the mikveh, dipping in the mikveh.
Would a
afterwards.
woman not bathe on the roof just to take a bath and cleanse herself because it's Tuesday?
That's a very possible commentary. We could keep both commentaries in mind. Okay, so it's very legitimate what you're saying, and but it's sort of like puts. I mean, when you watch the movie, this is sort of like what's happening there. Okay, it's like Bat Sheba is also tempting David in a way, because she knows where it is. And she knows she's very good looking, but the way the Bible is structuring it, I mean, the way the commentaries, the more traditional commentaries, they're trying to keep her modesty more, you know, making more the fault on David in that sense.
Is she aware that she's being watched?
That's a very good question. she, it could be. She might have, a canopy over, so she's modest in that sense because she doesn't want to be seen. Maybe she's taking opportunity of the fact that her husband is out, and she's doing that. And maybe the day before she saw David strolling on the roof, and now she's doing it again. Everything is possible, but also the commentary of the sages where she is just doing something that she has to do is also possible. So it's very good. It's like you're thinking all in the right direction here. And also, until now, everything is more or less okay. Everything is more or less kosher. Okay, but now we come to verse 3. And David sent and inquired after the woman. And one said, is not this Bat Sheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? Okay, so here things start to get complicated. Okay, the Hebrew says, Va'idrosh laisha. Okay, he demands to know who she is, but he also, he's just asking who she is, but he's asking in a way that it's sort of like demanding. Lidrosh is like to demand, so he's not just inquiring, it's even more than that. So there's a hint even here that maybe already he's asking for her, and they come back and they tell him, the messenger that he sent comes back and tells him, this must be Bat Sheba, daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite. So they're like putting off a red, a stop sign, and there's like, King David, we know you, we know your history with women. I forgot to mention that he's already married to several women here, okay? And the women are the ones that praise him after he kills Goliath, okay? The women of Israel go and praise out his beauty, and everyone says how beautiful he is, and all the women sort of like want to be with David. So the messenger or the people in the court or in his courtyard are saying, King David, this is not only the daughter of Eliam, it's also the wife, is a married woman of Uriah a Hittite. And why should this be a red flag for him? Okay, first of all, because she's married, and it's adultery, and it's a mitzvah in the Torah that he could be stoned and killed for if he transgresses. But even more so, Uriah now is in the army together with Eliam. So the father of Bat Sheba and the husband are both now in the army. They are actually part of in Samuel 2:23. It says that these are, you don't have to go there, but it says these are the names of the heroes that were like the squad of David, like the top elite unit. He had 36 top soldiers that always were with him and protected him. And one of them was Eliam, and another one is Uriah. Okay, I'm sorry, there were 37. Okay, so this should be another red flag for David, and it intensifies his sin even more. They are out there fighting for you and your kingdom, and you are now undermining them, okay, taking what's theirs, and in a way also destroying your kingdom. Okay, so it intensifies the sin, and King David could have stopped here and says, oh, you know what? I didn't realize she was just such a beauty, and I went to ask who she is. Okay, forget about it. I'll pass on. There are other good-looking women who are, available, to put it in a very blunt way. But no, the story here proceeds and says there's no moral stop for King David, and we're moving now. I just want to focus on the name Bat Sheba, okay? In Chronicles, she is called Bat Shua. So there are different ways of writing her name in the Bible, and it means maybe Sheva is 7, so maybe she's the 7th child in the home, or maybe she was born on her seventh month, okay, which was also very rare. So she was okay. So her survival rate at those, at those times were not very big. So because of the miracle that she was survived and grew up, so they called her Bat Sheba, the daughter of like 7 months. So these are different interpretations for her name. And Uriah Hitti is also very interesting. It means he's part of like he's not part of the Israelites. He's part of the Hittite tribe, okay? And it means he's some sort of like a convert. He's someone who joined the Israelites and joined David's army. We see that there were not everyone was part of the Israelites that were in the army. There were different tribes that aligned with David's kingdom and with the people of Israel throughout the history, and the Chittim are part of them as well. We actually also know them from the time of Abraham, from Hebron. So now we're in verse 4, and David sent messengers and took her. So now this is a blunt sin. Okay, now it's very clear that he takes her. Taking her is without asking her, okay? Because when you take something in a way like this, it means that you don't have an option. You can't refuse the king. And we have that, like in the book of Genesis, we have like Avimelech taking Sarah against her will. She has no choice about it because he's the king. So when the king takes something, it's his. Okay? And she came in unto him, and he lay with her, for she was purified from her uncleanness, and she returned unto her house. Okay? So this is a hint back to what you were asking about bathing. So this gives us a better indication of why it's probably that she was purifying from her menstruation, and she was following the biblical law. And also it tells us this is the right time for conception. Okay, this is sort of like the best time for a woman to get pregnant is exactly this time. So it shows us in a very tragic way, okay, all these sort of like things that are happening. David is not thinking about anything, okay? His mind is not focused on his kingdom. It's not focused on soldiers. It's not focused on, wait, she's purifying from menstruation, okay? Maybe he can't even, sleep with her, because if she still sees blood and she's not purified, that's another sin, okay? So he's not concerned with her becoming pregnant. All of these things are out of his mind, and the essence of the sin, the temptation, and following his immediate desires is on top of everything, which is very unbecoming of a king like David. But it is becoming his character as someone who's, in short terms, today we would call it like a womanizer. But even in those days, it was not considered. I mean, although kings had many wives, it was supposed to be done in a proper way, in a proper manner. You would marry someone, or you would have someone as a concubine. You wouldn't just see someone, pluck them as a flower, and use them in that way. That is wrong. That is a transgression according to the Bible as well, in any way, in shape and form, even if she was not married. The fact that she's married, the fact that he was warned that she is married, puts that sin, on the top of all the sins that a king could be doing until now. And unfortunately, we'll see this is not the last of his sins in this unfortunate story. Yes.
Do you want us to hold questions? Or do you want
No, if it has to do with the flow of the story,
Yeah,
so yeah, go ahead.
So, does he rape her? He rapes her?
No, he does not, although my mother here is on Zoom, she would say he was, he did.
Because if
Okay.
that would be a stronger statement than just,
Right, so in today's commentaries, some modern, postmodern feminist commentators say that yes, he raped her because she had no will here.
Then it says, and she returns, but the vo elab, she returns, and Vaishpav, and then he laid with her.
Right, so she had no choice. So in that sense, we could understand, okay, it is rape, but we do see in the Bible places where people refuse, okay, like, with Joseph, who refused to sleep, with the wife of Potiphar, when Dinah, for example, is raped. So it says vayanea. She was like what we said tortured, but that refers to rape. And there are other places in the Bible where it's clear where it's without any will and consent. So I would say there are two parts here. The first part is Bat Sheba has to come, okay, and but the fact that they're sleeping together, that doesn't tells us that he forced himself on her, okay? Again, you could come and say, what else could she do? But she could have refused, she could have cried out, and the Bible actually has a whole legislation of what happens when someone cries out and says, I need help, and someone's raping me, so there's a fine on the person who rapes, etc. This is not how it's described here. So there is some form of consent, not good for today's modern world. It would not work, okay? It's like in today's world, this would be like abusing your power as like if it would be like in a work setting or something like that, would not flow today. But in biblical terms, if we try to analyze how the Bible's looking at it, this is not considered as rape. Okay, yeah.
But,
That's a good question.
They lied together, the way it's said. It doesn't sound mean and ugly. It sounds quiet and agreeable.
Yes,
It
exactly.
sounds consensual.
It sounds consensual, but she had to be in the room there, okay? And if we add to it the fact that maybe she was bathing, knowing that King David would see her, okay? So there could be some sort of like collaboration in that sense. So the story is vague in that sense, but that's not our concern. But Sheva's consent, or was she temptress to David, that's not what the story is about. David not stopping in any red sign that he had, okay? Again, it would be like a teacher today in a classroom would fall in love in a young student, and she's 16 and she's all in love with him, and she, and they both love each other, but he's the professor. He's the one who needs to know how to stop and put that red signs from a moral point of view. And if she's married and they tell him all of this and it doesn't, cling in, then there's a moral problem with that person. Yes.
Well, not to be political, but it sounds like Donald.
Yeah, no, we're not going to take politics.
I didn't think of that.
But thanks for bringing up no politics. Yeah.
You said that David had several wives. In wartime, is there any argument for soldiers and sort of marriage being on hold? It's wartime. Maybe maybe the Hittite man is,
Right, not considered married. Right. So these are very good questions that the sages raise. Are you're thinking about it, or something you read somewhere?
I read it here, but I also was just interested in marriage in general. Why does David get to have multiple wives?
The king.
Because no. You could anyone could have multiple wives as long as you could support them. Until just recently, 1,000 years ago, Rabbi Gershom, we said Ashkenazim could only have one wife, but Yemenites until today, some of them still have few wives. can marry more than one wife in Judaism.
Yeah, I read it here that
Yeah,
it says.
but what you said, something else that I want to refer to, which not now, but we'll talk about next week, that the sages say that Uriah actually gave his wife, gave Bat Sheba like a get, okay? And it's very complicated. When did he give the get? So this sort of like takes the fault out of David. And that's why some of the sages say David did not sin. It is, I do not follow that interpretation because it's not in the text, and it tries to get David out of a situation, but it's a very common commentary in that sense.
I had read somewhere, I don't remember, that all soldiers of that time, before they were sent off, were divorced. They granted the wives divorce.
That's a commentary.
Just in case,
Right.
something
There's
happened.
no hint to that in the text.
Right.
Okay. On the contrary, the text wants to tell us the opposite here as we go along the text. But that's how the Talmud, or parts of some sages in the Talmud, sort of like get David off the hook. Oh, she gave a get. But, and this is a big but, even if he did, he's still alive while this is happening. So how do you justify that? It's a little bit complicated. We'll talk about it next week. So we have until 1 o'clock. Oh, here, my mother wrote, absolutely raped by someone with more power than she. The king commands and she's taken. Okay, Mom. Okay. And Annie, who's a congregant for Saba, now in Vancouver, in Israel today, many combat soldiers forgive. Oh, yeah, they do give a conditional get to their wives. Yes, that was actually, I will show you a picture from World War I. Men would give get to their women as they would go to war. We have it documented from World War I, where Jewish men would give a get to their wives from the American Army. It's like it's fascinating. I'll show it to you later on. I have a photo of that.
That means a person could have an affair while their husband was off to war?
No, it's actually only on the condition that if I die, this get is sort of like in effect. Why? Because if my body is never found, okay, she's not a widow, she's still married, so therefore, once it's not found for a certain amount of time, then you are divorced. It's like a get on condition. Okay. Okay. Very, very good. It's to prevent the Aguna situation. Thank you, Mom. So, how are we on time? We're okay if we go till 1 o'clock?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So now, again, the drama of this story and trying to think about, Bat Sheba and her feelings and what just happened now. We will talk about all these things. We just want to focus more on the text today. But at verse 5, the unfortunate things happens, and the woman conceived, and she sent and told David and said, I am with child. Okay, so she does not come back to the palace. She tells him, Hara Anochi, and she's basically telling him, I'm in danger. I'm now pregnant. I'm worried that people will say that I betrayed my husband while he's at war. My husband can now, the law of the sotah, okay, where you have the jealous husband, the zealot husband that says, like, if I suspect my wife, okay, has betrayed me, I could bring her in front of the priest and she has to drink those special water, okay, that checks if she betrayed or not, okay? It's in the book of Bamidbar, Numbers, but we're not going to go over that now but she's afraid that he could enact that biblical law against her, and obviously also from a social point of view, this is very, everyone would mock her and what she did, and the child would also be a bastard, of course, and he will never be able to marry and be part of the Israelites. And she's basically saying, what do we do now? Okay, and they're both in trouble in that sense. So now the unbelievable thing happens. Like, what would King David be able to say? Well, let's first read verse 6 and then go back to verse 5 and ask ourselves, what are the things David could have done? But David immediately, without even thinking, on verse 6 says, and David sent to Yoab. Yoab is chief of staff, the head of the army, saying, send me Uriah the Hittite. And Yoab sent Uriah to David. Okay, so David's intention is very clear. He wants Uriah to come back home, sleep with his wife immediately, as soon as possible. In this way, there will be no suspicion that she committed adultery. Okay, off the hook. Brilliant plan. Okay, very immoral. Very wrong. Everything gets more complicated. What other things David could have done? First of all, David could have not taken any responsibility. She's like, who are you? Okay, I don't remember you. But no, he's not doing that. So let's give him a little bit credit. Okay, a tiny bit of credit. David is could confess and say, I have wronged. Okay, please remove me from my kingdom. Okay, King Saul was bad, and I replaced him. I'm also bad. Please replace me. We'll go to God. He could go to the prophet at that time and said, I screwed up. What do I do? Okay, how do I fix this? Or he could go to the court of law and face consequences, which is betrayal and then death for him and Bat Sheba. Why is he doing this more sneaky thing?
Wants to save himself.
Wants to save himself, wants to save his kingdom. Okay, so he understands that if he tells Bat Sheba, I don't know you, she could say, yes, I do. And I have people that could testify that you sent for me, because this was, while it wasn't public and the entire city of Jerusalem knew about it, it probably, it happened sometime where there are messengers, enough people would talk about it, and he can't cover his tracks in that sense. But his I would say, like, his criminal way of thinking, that the way it all started, like, I want this woman, I had this woman, now she's pregnant, and now phase 2 is, oh, you're pregnant, let's bring your husband and fix that. That is sort of like, David is not in a good strife. Okay, it's like one after the other. This positive king who saved the people of Israel from Goliath, who united the people of Israel, who's conquering lands, and who's expanding, who's bringing some sort of like prosperity for the people of Israel for the first time for a very long time, okay, is, one fault after the other is going through, and it happens to some politicians, again, no current politics, okay, but we could think about, good leaders that when it comes to this personal issue, okay, have wronged, and and on both sides, right? Not just Republicans, also Democrats, also in Israel. We could think about leaders. We could think about European leaders, and we sometimes like to separate that. We sometimes like to say, well, that's his personal life. He's a good king. He's a good president. He's doing good. He's bringing peace to the world. Okay, he's expanding the land. We're with prosperity, and economy is blooming. Okay. Does the Bible care about all these things? The Bible is so clear about saying we don't give nothing about the situation, the economy, the expanding the land, peace and prosperity. None of that means anything to the Bible, because how do we know that? Because they choose to tell us this story and how immoral the king is. They're not talking about how wonderful of a king is. Okay, so if you're morally fault, this is a very important message from the Bible. You're not fit to be a leader, or even if you're fit to be, you need to correct your wrongs. So sometimes in our modern world, we like to separate that and say, you know what, like, he's a great, so whatever. So he had an affair or something like that with a married woman or not. It's like, or he lied to us about having that affair or not, referring to some leaders in our days and age. But he's a great leader because he accomplished. No, the Bible could not care less about that. That's a very important lesson. Yeah.
There followed him a mess of food from the king. Would that be considered a bribe?
What verse?
8.
Oh, we didn't get to 8. Okay. When we get to verse 8, we will talk about that. But because there's a whole process of how this happens. So yes.
I mean, this isn't the only thing that David did as king in which we're in the wrong, and the Bible really points out that many of our great leaders were not perfect. Abraham, Jacob, or even Moses in some cases. So, which I think is a good thing to show out that people aren't perfect. So they point out their errors, which is important, but we don't expect them to be completely without.
It's true, but when you as a leader, and we will see that, when you as a leader make political mistakes, the Bible forgives you more, okay? You don't have to be reelected, you're king, okay? So next time you won't make that mistake, or sometimes God does not forgive those mistakes. But when you do a moral mistake, for that, you have to do tshuva, you have to repent, or sometimes if you don't, you are removed as king. So that's really the focus of the Bible, and it's a very important, I think, lesson for us. Okay, so we are like 10 minutes over time, and I think we do have a very good start, and we do. I want to stop the recording and take some questions from people as well. So we'll stop here. We only did 6 verses, and we're in the middle of the great suspense. So this is, as I said, to be continued. Don't read at home. Okay, what's next? But it's a very good discussion, and I do want to spend a minute or two asking you if we're on the right track, and this is how we want to proceed. So we're going to stop the recording.